and welcome to another Blender Tute. Today we're going to have a look at using volumetric lighting as part of creating a procedurally generated cyberpunk style city. So if you're not familiar with cyberpunk, there's plenty of links on the Google Classroom site. You can do a search on the web, you'll find plenty of stuff as well. We're going to create a scene something like this, where we'll let Blender do the work of creating the city, and we'll also let it start to do the lighting for us. Once you get the basic city set up, you'll be able to experiment with lighting and different colors, and add in extra buildings and things like that. So there's plenty of good YouTube videos around that show artists' cyberpunk work. So go and have a look for those if you're interested, but let's just start straight out in Blender now. So you can see that I've got on my left menu there, I can use my T key to bring that up or hide it away. So I'll keep that tool shelf visible because we're going to be using that. But the first thing that we need to do is go straight into user preferences and add-ons, and I need to make sure I've got testing and I've got all selected, so we can find the discombobulator. So if I just put DISC for discombobulator, you'll see it's got these mesh tools here, discombobulator. Just click on the checkbox. You can see it's in beta. It's not fully functional, but it'll work well enough for us for this project. Okay, so now I've got that turned on. I'm just going to go back into 3D view, and I've got a blank kind of scene here at the moment. I've just got the camera, but I've taken away the light and any other kind of initial starting objects. So I'm just going to Shift A to add a plane for starters, and we won't make it any bigger or smaller. We'll just keep it at that size. Hit my Tab key or go down here to go into edit mode, whichever way you prefer, and I'm going to hit W, and I'm going to subdivide, W subdivide, W subdivide, and W subdivide. That's probably enough for starters. If you want to subdivide your city into a more complex scene, you can do it some more, okay? But don't go too high with your subdivisions. Okay, now we're in edit mode at the moment. We can't see the discombobulator. If I go back out to object mode, so I can do it through this menu here, and then scroll down to the bottom of this tool shelf, we'll see that we've got the discombobulator. Okay, now it doesn't work perfectly, so I recommend turning off doodads at the moment. Okay, they worked really well in early versions of Blender, but they've gone a bit by the wayside, which is a pity because they're really good. They added these weird containers and shapes on top of your buildings, but we'll have to do that manually, I think, at the moment. Okay, now you've got a range here in the discombobulator, so we've got our minimum height and our maximum height. And so it's going to randomly generate kind of, chunky squares that look a bit like buildings between those two values. We've got tapers, so we can also have it randomly taper the variables here. And we've got a repeat protrusions, and that will kind of like break our squares down into smaller sections to, create more buildings from them. So we might turn that on too. Don't go high with this. Max height, don't go very high with that. 0.5 would be going a fair way. 1 will give you like a massive building, so don't go that far. Okay, so we're basically set up. We can ignore all the rest there. And one thing with this, if you want to, you can select specific faces and then go and discombobulate those, but I'm just going to do the whole scene at once here, I think. So let's just go back to object mode, and I'm just going to click on discombobulate. Okay, and it's going to have a thinker for a minute. Okay, and we've got ourselves some discombobulation. Okay, so now once we start to get in and have a look at this, we can see that we've got the basics of a city that we can start to use. And we've got this one, because I turned on the 2, it's broken it down. We've got some extra stuff on the side here as well. Okay, so that's not too bad. If you decide that you for whatever reason you don't like the discombobulation, all you've got to do is select it, hit your X key, and you'll often find that there'll be a couple of different repeats of the object as you look into it, and your mesh grid will always be down in the base here. Okay, so this will do us for the moment. We won't get too more complicated, but just know that if you want to add a bit more variety to your buildings, whoops, I'll just turn off my proportional editing. You can start to scale and alter these buildings as you need to, but I recommend that you set up your camera first and see what's going to be in view, and then you can start to add a bit more complexity of your city scene as you go along. Okay, at the moment these buildings are all quite uniform in size, but if you want to adjust the size of the faces in that initial plane before you get going, you can do that, and that'll give you, a bit more variety. So not everything's quite automatic in this, but it's not too bad. Okay, so it'll give us an interesting texture to get things going. Okay, now I'm going to go up and find my camera here before we start getting too carried away. Okay, so I've got my camera and I'm just going to go and find it. Here we go, it's up at the top here. Okay, this is quite a small scene, so yeah, you can get thrown a little bit by it. So I'll move my camera in, I'll get it into the general region and start to see what it's seeing. I don't mind just quickly sometimes just changing my outliner to the 3D view, hitting my 0, and then so I can see what my camera's up to. I find that's not too bad a way of framing up a shot just really quickly. So let's just bring things in here. Okay, so we're starting to look across our city skyline, and I might just rotate the camera a little bit so things are on a little bit more of an angle. It's a little bit more interesting, and I might also just adjust the camera lens a little bit so it's a little bit more of a landscape one. So let's put in 18mm, widen things up a bit, and let's just push in the camera a little bit. I'll push it into local, sorry, to make things a little bit better. Okay, so that will do us for starters. Okay, so we've got a few buildings in the foreground which are we're going to have the light sort of flowing around them once we use our volumetrics. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is add in, I'm just going to add in a point light. Okay, whoops, I've just added some extra stuff into my scene here. Let's just add a lamp, point light, that's good. And we want to have that sort of in the camera's view, so I'll set it over here. I'll just have a look from top view, it's sort of sitting out of our city. That's about right. Okay, so let's have a look at this. It's all pretty much set up right, but you might need to take this up to say about 5,000. Make sure you've got multiple importance turned on, and we'll leave it as a white light for the moment. That's all good. So next thing we need to do is add into our scene a cube. So let's just add the cube in now, and we'll scale this really big. Okay, so we want our city to live inside this cube, and the cube is going to contain our volumetric data for our lighting. So instead of having a material on the surface, it's going to have a volumetric material inside of it. So I'm just going to click on New, go to my node editor, whoops, not my logic, my node editor, and I'm just going to come across to the material. And at the moment you can see we've got just a white diffuse material going onto the surface. So I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to come down to add shaders, and I'm going to add a mix shader. Hook that up, instead of to surface, hook it up to volume, because we're talking volumes here. And then we're going to go add a shader, and we're going to add a volume absorption, and we're also going to add, down in shaders, we're going to add a volume scatter as well. Okay, so they're the only two ones with volume in the name, and the shaders right down the bottom. So we'll hook those up. Okay, and these are going to start to create the fog now that the light's going to shine through, the atmosphere is going to start absorbing the light. So that's why I turned that point light up to a ridiculously high value. Okay, so we should be about right. So let's just go and pop this into a rendered mode, and now we can start having a look at our scene. It's looking pretty good. Okay, so we can start to see already that our world is starting to light up with volumetrics, so we can see the haze sort of shining through. Okay, so we might need to start knocking back that light source now a little bit. So I might just pop this back into 3D view and go and hunt down that light source. I might stick this back onto my outliner, so I can start to select my point light. I'll just reconfigure this all now. So let's go 3D view, hide this away, have a look through the camera, and now I'm just going to pop this up into rendered mode. So let's have a look here, and let's have a look at our point light, 1000. Let's maybe take that down to 1000. Okay, now we're starting to get somewhere. So just starting to reduce that light a little bit, and we may have to increase the bounding box size as well. So let's take this back down a little bit lower again. Just see how we're looking. Okay, that's good. That's starting to get there. It's looking a little bit sort of darker and moodier. So let's pop this up here. Look, I'm going to just scale this box up a little bit, so we've got less sort of edges of our volumetrics to bounce things around on. That's looking good. And then I might just get our light, our point light, and let's have a look here. I might just start reducing where it sits, so it's going to sort of like sit lower on the horizon. It's going to give us a little bit more of a menacing sort of look to the scene. So let's let that tune up a little bit. Yep, okay, so that's getting there. They're pretty much all the settings that you'll need. If you go into the node editor and have a look at the materials on that cube, so we'll have a look at the volumetric materials here. You can start to play with the density, and you can of the absorption here. So if I put this up to a high value, you'll see that the atmosphere is absorbing a lot of light as light passes through it, so we get kind of like a bright point in the distance. So just experiment with those. And the other one is the volume scatter. So we can start to change how the light scatters through the volumetric atmosphere as well. Okay, so both of these take a little bit of experimentation to find the good settings. But if you've got these sort of in the region of what the software gives you at the start, you'll be fine. Okay, so once you set it up, don't forget to go through into your render presets, maybe turn the presets right up, and you'll be ready to start rendering. Okay, so once you've got that up and going, it's pretty easy. You can start looking at adding other light sources within the city, and you can start breaking up some of these towers and adding like emission materials onto the surfaces as well, and that'll, you know, start to give you a good effect. So it's all about kind of framing. Once you get to this point, getting things looking nice and interesting. Hunt around in cycles and look for some interesting angles. And see if you can find angles where the light is sort of really shining through. So I've got one that I did earlier in Photoshop there, and you can see that I was able to sort of line it up so that the emission light was shining, just down through the buildings. You won't see that until you go to a much higher resolution. So in your cycles, you might need to turn that in the sampling, turn that up, and also it'll appear when you do your render, which will be a lot sort of higher values as well. So we'll leave it for now. I'll just leave this one to render, and we'll see how it looks in the end. You may need to play a little bit with clamping to get rid of the fireflies if you're suffering from those, which is a possibility. Alright, thanks for that, and I'll see you later.